Hi everyone, welcome to this video. We are highlighting Gestalt Play Therapy, and I'm joined by the wonderful Felicia Carroll. Thank you so much for doing this, Felicia. I really appreciate you joining me here.
Well, this is just a real privilege, Robert, to do this with you. I've always wanted to really connect with you this way in your work, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love this play therapy approach. You know that there's so many just pieces to it that kind of resonate with me personally. So every time I learn more about it, I just feel a little more connected to it. And we connected a few years ago
Yes.
when I was doing the training. And you're like, hey, this thing you're doing, you're talking about with neurodivergent kids, this is like a lot of Gestalt play therapy here.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is going to be good information, I think, for our audience. So can we start with just that? What, is in brief, I know that's very hard, but what is Gestalt play therapy?
Yeah. When you asked me to do this, I went, yikes, Gestalt play therapy in 25 words or less. Let's see
Right.
how we do this. Well, I gave it some thought where I wanted to begin this, and I decided that I think I wanted to honor my colleague, Violet Oaklander,
Mhm.
who recently died, and it's been a tremendous loss, but she left so much behind. And so most of my comments, I want to just really honor what she has done here.
Great.
Um, so in 1979, we have to go back in history a little bit. 1979, when Windows to Our Children, a Gestalt approach to children and adolescents, was published, Violet actually made, with that book, a very significant contributions to the field of child psychotherapy. There were many alternative approaches and ways of being with children that was very different and unique at that time. But Violet asked herself the question that actually many clinicians before her had asked about: how do I apply the principles of a particular theoretical orientation, in this case, Gestalt psychotherapy, that was being, there were a lot of literature out in 1979 about Gestalt therapy with adults. And some people were experimenting or seeing how do we apply this with adults. But Violet asked herself this question. So she enters into that same kind of lineage as the person we're most familiar with, Virginia Axline, but also Anna Freud and Melanie Klein and Winnicott and even B.F. Skinner. And those years between the 50s and the 70s, the 80s, when a lot of people were asking themselves this question.
Mm-hmm.
So she began in her trainings as a Gestalt therapist to ask this: how do I apply these principles of Gestalt psychotherapy with children and adolescents? And so her book, Windows to Our Children, I think laid out this various principles. And I like to talk about them like four pillars of what are four pillars of Gestalt therapy with children and Gestalt play therapy. So if you like, Robert, I'll just kind of mention what some of those are.
Sure.
Is that okay? All right. First and foremost, Violet sort of revolutionized, and I'm going to use that word not as hyperbole. She really began to change the nature of the therapeutic relationship. She talked about a relationship. She wrote about a relationship. Again, remember, she's coming out of many years of Gestalt psychotherapy and theory with adults, but she saw the importance of a mutually engaged, authentic relationship with a child, where it was a human relationship where I am who I am. It's not theater. I like to say, Gestalt therapy is not theater. It is a human experience. And so it's not a hierarchical relationship in which there's a split between the child and the therapist. We come together in this relationship, in this venture of trying to understand more fully what the child's needs are and how we're going to meet those needs. So the child is met as a person, it's respected, and is responded to, even though I have, as a therapist, certain skills and responsibilities. That's true. But at the same time, we are here together. And as I was thinking about this and mentioning this, I thought about such a session that I had recently with a child. What we were making some clay figures. And while we were doing that and talking about the figures had been made and so forth, this little guy looked up at me and he said, "You know, you're not like my other therapist." And he had been in therapy with somebody else. And I said, "Oh, and he said, "So how am I different if I'm not like them?" And he said, "I really don't know." And he wrote, "You're just more real somehow."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that Violet brought to child psychotherapy. And it's an essential part of Gestalt therapy, and that is the nature of this relationship and how we build that relationship with the child and work together. Mm-hmm. So I can be responsive to children. I can be reflective, but that's not my primary modality. I am there and engaged, and even if there are 4 or 5, we are there together, 2 human beings on a very important journey for that child.
Yeah, that's great.
So another one of these pillars that I like to mention is very significant, and that is that as Gestalt Play Therapy and Gestalt therapy comes out of a more organismic paradigm, not the more mechanistic paradigms that we've seen historically. So we look at how does this child as an organism, what is this child needing to grow and to thrive and to develop? And the very symptoms that are bringing a child into therapy tell us that there are needs, there are supports that are not being met and are not there. And so she delineated these elements in a therapy process that are in keeping with how do we support this organismic functioning, no matter what the strengths and limitations are of this child. But what is bringing this child into therapy? And what is it that we need to do to restore this kind of organismic functioning? So these elements are, how do we use various things? We're concerned with how is this child making contact with his world? Because some of the symptoms that bring a child into therapy, according to our perspective, are constrictions of contact functions, such as using the senses, the body's energy. I like to use Jaak Panksepp's term, rough and tumble play, which we do here in session, finding that energy and enjoying it and making it playful. Movement, voice, breath, emotional regulation, how the child is thinking and solving problems, how does a child know what they like or don't like, or how do they get their needs met? So all of these things are a part of what we're doing in Gestalt therapy, so restoring that piece. The other has to do with a sense of self. And that self is one of those words that also we spend a lot of time thinking about. But anyway, it has to do with knowing who I am, essentially. How am I different from others? How am I similar? What are my likes and dislikes? How do I make choices? How do I choose to do the things I do, assuming responsibility for those actions and those consequences? So these, and self-nurturing, we're looking at these introjects, these beliefs the child has about themselves, and how we can see how those various beliefs about themselves are constricting their ability to function. So one of the things we realized too is that this process of restoring organismic functioning needs support. And it's important for us then simply to provide those kinds of resources and those experiences that children need for that.
I love that.
Yeah, and it redefines what symptoms are. Mm-hmm. Don't talk about problems or what's wrong with you. It's like, what do you need?
Right. I love
That's different. That's different.
Yes.
So one of the third pillar I want to mention about the Gestalt Play Therapy is that we have a particular method or a phenomenological process for working with all these various creative modalities that we have, that we can use as the language of children, as the way they express themselves or communicate oftentimes, even adolescents. So these modalities allow children to, the way that we work, allow children to sometimes become more aware of what's out of awareness, or sometimes things that are unspoken, or finding a language for even expressing or saying. And sometimes that goes back to that a picture or an expressive modality is worth 1,000 words.
Right.
You know, kids don't have all that language, but they can capture it in a picture, in an image, that right hemispheric biographical memory and image and emotion. They capture that. And we have to be ready to know how to give language or give expression. So the modalities that, you know, we all are familiar with, drawings and sand tray, clay and puppets, stories, Legos, music, these are not therapy. They are our tools. It's like the surgeon's knives and things are not the surgery. That is the tools that the surgeon in the hands of those, you know, can use to do great things. And we can do the same thing with these tools, these modalities. One of the things is that we have to be skillful, though, in the use of those tools. And that's where a lot of our workshops and trainings and the various things, how do we use these tools, and so that they are very effective. But what's important for us in Gestalt therapy is that we use the tools in order to be able to listen to the child's voice. It's not my interpretation. It's not my analysis. It's not the you know, the manual's interpretation. It's not what I think. It's what the child, it's the meaning the child is giving to their own process. And their voice has to be there. And the phenomenological process is a way of creating what is this, and how does this fit you? How does this help us understand your life? Is there a way you are like this? And oftentimes, you know, it's like, yeah, that I am like that. I get mad like that, or I'm scared like that, or, you know, then the voice emerges and the meaning of that experience is there. I can give you another example if you want. After a drawing of an image of an incident of domestic violence that because she was a young teenager, had just drawn, and she drew herself sitting in the corner crying all alone, and she talked about feeling so alone in this experience. And after she had drawn this, I just for some reason asked her, because I knew she'd seen other therapists about this kind of thing, and I said, have you ever told anyone else about this experience? And she very quietly said yes. And then I asked, well, what was their response to this? And she said, they said that they were sorry that this had happened to me. And we were just silent for just a moment. And then she just looked up at me and she said softly, but sorry doesn't help.
Wow.
And I said, you know, you're right. It doesn't. And together, we will find what will help you. So the modality gave her a voice.
Yeah.
And my response gave her a sense, you're not alone with this now. Together, we're going to find what you need. I was very moved by her and just touched by, once again, the depth that how these processes that we use can, the depth that we can go to with children through these processes to give them an opportunity.
Wow.
Well, okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. I got a fourth one.
Yes.
Okay. You got a fourth one? Okay.
Yes.
So here's the fourth one. I think this is very important too. So according to our Gestalt reports approach, and we know this, that development doesn't occur in isolation. Children don't just spring up by themselves. They grow in an environment and relationships with others. So this requires the child therapist to build working relationships with parents, with schools, with communities and other professionals, like consulting with people like you and others. I do this all the time, to assure support for the integrated development and what we're doing here with children. Clark Moustakas is another one of those people that I think is so underappreciated in our field. But he wrote a wonderful book called, are you familiar with Clark Moustakas, by the way? Okay. Yeah. He wrote this book, great, Being In, Being For, and Being With. Beautiful title, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the being for part of that is about advocacy and being able to go outside of the consultation room to discover the resources and the supportive resources for children and to actively create them if they're not there. So in Gestalt Play Therapy, we really recognize the importance of developing supportive context.
Sure.
In family and in community, in schools, and so forth.
Wow.
So when Windows was published, actually these 4 ideas presented major alternatives to what was being done in the field at that time. Now the field's changed considerably, I know. And I think they've changed in the direction of a lot of these things that Violet was writing about and presenting in the 80s, you know?
Yeah.
And the field of neuroscience and neurobiology has certainly been a significant contributor and supportive of what we do in Gestalt Play Therapy. So what Violet did created some differences that made a big difference, and the world has really taken notice of Violet's work, and so the range goes, her influence is far and wide. It's international, and her contributions, I think, are major ones to who we are as Gestalt therapists, as play therapists.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those are my 4 pillars. Okay, when you say what is Gestalt Play Therapy? Well. Read Violet's book for one thing. But, that's it, a little bit in a nutshell.
I really like and appreciate you described it that way, because you could have said a lot of things in a lot of different ways. And I love the way that you talked about it, because you took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking there are so many people who are, you see it, there's so many of these ideas that were her ideas. You know, you see them coming out today, even in other disciplines that are not mental health, and like they're new ideas. And it's like, these aren't new ideas. You know, these have existed in the field of play therapy, in Gestalt Play Therapy, for decades. And it's nice to see people catching up with these ideas, but I think it's important for people to know the history. And I think there's so many pieces that are so affirming, when you talk about the relationship, how it's designed, and you talk about giving the child a voice and how it's about their needs. And then especially, let's look at the whole child, this whole organism, right? And get it involved. I mean, that's just so affirming. That's affirming work at its core.
It's a creative process too. I could have said more about that. Yes, it is. I feel affirmed every day in my work, and it's always creative. It's always different, because each child is different. There's no 2 ways children do anxiety.
Yes.
Even if it sounds similar, there are no 2 ways.
Right.
Children are doing that. Different children do anxiety. So I've always valued and appreciated this, and I've actually gone to trainings with many other different approaches, and I'll just kind of say this, but I find the Gestalt approach being very inclusive and integrative. And it's not difficult for me, like, to integrate the AutPlay perspective and work. And when a child on the spectrum that comes into my office, it's not difficult for me. I don't have to put on a different hat.
Right.
You know, I can integrate that and think about that in a way that allows me to move forward and be respectful of others too. So yeah, Joyce Mills, storytelling. I use a lot of narrative in trauma work and in the work that I do here. So it's in Clark, Moustakis, and of course neurobiology. I mean, there's so many. Yeah.
Well, we obviously talk about children when we talk about play therapy. When you think about this approach, this theory, is there a target population in terms of age or target issues, diagnosis?
Well, actually, I don't think in terms of those kinds of things.
Okay.
It's sort of like, as a Gestalt therapist, I mean, it's from, well, I would say, when a child, young children, like maybe 2 or 3, and sometimes an older, even a very young 4. But I have right now working with a child who's a young 4. Symbolic play and energy work and all those kinds of things. But you begin to integrate more of the family, the parents, into the work. It's not so much just, which we do always, but other than that, population and ages, no. I don't. It's like, as I said earlier, it's that each child brings a unique situation into this therapeutic space.
Yeah.
And so if there are situations where I need more information or, training, or I feel like even psychotherapy is not what is absolutely needed right now, that other needs need to be met in other ways, or I begin to work adjunctively to what someone else is doing. So when each child brings in whatever they bring in terms of strengths, limitations, symptoms, neurodiversity, cultural diversity, I first have to ask, do I have the resources here? And how do I get those for myself? Or do I need to make a referral to another clinician or another area, adjunctive kind of treatment approaches? I like to think of Gestalt Play Therapy as being what we call multifocal, which means I'm looking at a variety of different things at once. So I'm looking at the child, I'm looking at the context, I'm looking at myself, how all those pieces are coming together. This word Gestalt maybe helps us here. What is Gestalt? It's an odd word that doesn't really help us much unless we understand a little bit of German.
Right.
It's a German word, but it comes out of Gestalt psychology, or Gestalt psychology and research into perception. How do these various elements come together and work together, the whole and the parts? So I have to keep this multifocal as this Gestalt. How do all these elements and parts come together?
Right.
So no matter what the issue is, no matter what the age is, I have to look at all those elements and see how they come together in a way that I feel confident that we can meet this child's needs, or I'll find a way.
Right.
I'll find those resources.
Well, I love that answer, by the way. Great response. Oh, it just resonates with me personally as a therapist, that you focus, that, we should be more focused on the child than we are on a set of procedures, and I just love that answer.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about what I do as a Gestalt therapist. If it's in the field, I use certain kind of ethical and moral considerations, of course, and professional considerations. but we can, you know, it's like if it's there, we can use it
Yeah,
as in a way that meets the needs of the children that we're working with.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just feel like I could sit here all day and just let you talk about it because I love every time
Well,
you
I
say
could sit
something.
here and talk all
I
day,
know
but
we could. We'll finish this up and then we'll
okay,
just
all right,
spend all day talking about it.
all right.
But
Sounds good.
I want to give people like resources so they can dive more into this
Yeah.
play therapy theory. Any websites, training resources, book resources, and of course, I'll make sure they're all up here on the video for everybody to link to.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I mean, there are many Gestalt institutes. And if you're in an area or a country, you know, I would encourage people because many institutes all over the world, Gestalt institutes, have training programs in children and adolescents. So I don't know who the audience is going to be seeing this, but wherever you are, look and see if there is a Gestalt institute doing that kind of training. Of course, I'm going to mention the West Coast Institute for Gestalt Therapy, which is the institute that I have founded and currently will be co-directing with my colleague Valente Orozco. So you can go to our website, also the Violet Solomon Oaklander Foundation website. They also are very supportive and have resources there, and I believe even have a bookstore. But Violet's book is available on Amazon. Windows to Our Children and Hidden Treasure are the two books, and of course numerous articles. I've written chapters and Violet's written chapters in a lot of the play therapy texts that are available. And so I think one thing I might say about the West Coast Institute too, if you really find yourself just wanting to go into more Gestalt therapy with children with depth, we have a certification program that's based on a lot of different criteria that have to be met, including theoretical essay writing and case narrative writing. And there's just a lot of it's an in-depth process to really call yourself a certified Gestalt therapist with children and adolescents. So it's modeled after a lot of the certification programs at Gestalt institutes around the world. So, but just look, and those resources are there.
Yeah.
So these are some of the major ones that, of course, are important here. But
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
and journals too. You'll see on the website I edited one of the International Gestalt Journal on Gestalt therapy with children, and a number of different writers all over the world. I edited that, and that's available. And if you're interested, and if also on our website we have a list of certified people and the list of international training programs of people in other countries from Asia, South America, Europe, Africa, people who are offering training programs in those areas that we have associated with, and we know these people, so they're good clinicians and trainers. Yeah.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you sharing those resources too. I think, people want to know, where they can get more information, especially trainings, and your facility is a great one. And again, check out these resources that Felicia mentioned, the books, go to the websites, look into the trainings. You got lots of opportunities to dive deeper into this play therapy approach. Well, I just want to thank you again for joining me and giving your time to share with everybody, a little bit more about this. I know, again, we had to kind of keep it brief, but I think it's a nice teaser, right? As we call it. The trailer to the movie. Now go take a big training and dive deeper into the process.
I was going to say our training program started February. We'll be online until June. We'll do online trainings. And then starting in June, we're going to hopefully be in person.
Awesome.
So, and so take a look. There's several really fine programs there. We have basic, intermediate, and advanced programs. Okay.
So good.
Thank you. Well, thank you for this opportunity to share and
Yeah.
to tell people and to get the word out. Thank you, Robert.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you guys for watching. Just come back and check out more videos on the YouTube channel. Bye.
Bye-bye.